I signed the deed to the penthouse in Halcyon Tower, believing that $4 million bought more than just a view. I thought it bought silence. For 32 years, I had been the family banker, the quiet fixer. But when my parents arrived in my lobby with my sister's luggage and a proprietary smile, I realized a simple deadbolt was not enough. To keep them out, I would have to become someone they finally feared. The ink on the closing documents was still wet when I finally allowed myself to breathe. I sat across from the escrow officer in a conference room that smelled of stale coffee and expensive laminate, watching her slide the keys across the mahogany table. There were 3 of them, heavy, silver, and utterly silent. They did not jingle. They did not announce themselves. They simply existed, cool and solid against the palm of my hand. "Congratulations, Ms. Parker," the officer said, closing the thick folder with a satisfying thud. "The deed is recorded. The unit is yours." I nodded, unable to speak for a moment. I had practiced this feeling in my head for 5 years. I had imagined I would feel ecstatic, or perhaps triumphant, like a climber planting a flag on a summit. Instead, I felt a profound, vibrating relief, the kind that sits deep in the marrow. "Thank you," I whispered. I walked out of the title company office and into the humid afternoon air of Alder Grove. The city hummed with its usual mid-afternoon energy. Traffic snarled on 4th Avenue, pedestrians dodging puddles from the morning rain. But I looked up, high above the skyline, piercing the gray clouds like a needle of glass and steel. Stood Halcyon Tower, on the 42nd floor, behind floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the river, was 3,000 square feet of silence. It was mine, and the best part was that nobody knew. I had bought the penthouse through a limited liability company I had named after a constellation, specifically to keep my name off the public registry. It had cost me an extra $1,500 in legal fees and weeks of administrative headaches, but it was the most important money I had ever spent. On paper, the owner of Unit 42A was a faceless entity. In reality, it was Natalie Parker, the daughter who was tired of being the family ATM. I met Ava Chen at a wine bar 3 blocks away. Ava was the only person in the world who knew the truth. She was not just my realtor, she was the vault where I kept my secrets. She was waiting for me in a dark booth, a bottle of champagne already on ice. "Did you get them?" she asked, her eyes wide. I opened my hand and showed her the keys. Ava let out a squeal that turned heads at the bar, then immediately lowered her voice. Leaning in, "You did it. I honestly cannot believe you pulled it off." "Do they know?" I shook my head, sliding into the leather booth. "No, and I'm not telling them until the ink is dry on the wire transfer." Ava poured 2 glasses, the bubbles fizzing aggressively. "Natalie, you know you have to tell them eventually. Elaine is going to track you down. She has a radar for your disposable income." I took a sip, the cold liquid sharp against my tongue. "I know. But just for tonight, I want to own it. Just me. I want to look at those keys and know that they belong to me. Not the Parker Family Trust, not the Brooke Parker Emergency Fund. Just me." We drank to that. We drank to the 7 years I had spent rebuilding my credit score after my father, Richard, had convinced me to co-sign a loan for a business expansion that never happened. That little disaster had tanked my credit to the mid-500s and taken me 4 years of austerity to fix. We drank to the weekends I spent working overtime consulting gigs instead of dating. We drank to the silence. But silence, in my family, was always the calm before the invasion. I called them the next day. I had to, if they found out from a third party. The guilt trip would last until the next presidential administration. I put the phone on speaker and set it on the quartz countertop of my new kitchen island, staring out at the view of the bridge. "Hi, Mom," I said when she picked up. "Natalie!" Elaine Parker's voice was a melodic chirp, the sound of a woman who prioritized appearances above oxygen. "We were just talking about you. Your father says you haven't visited the showroom in weeks. I've been busy. Mom, actually, that is why I'm calling. I moved. There was a pause, a heavy, loaded silence. You moved? Moved where? You just signed a lease renewal on the apartment on Elm. Didn't you? No, I didn't renew. I bought a place. I waited for the explosion. Instead, I heard a muffled sound as she covered the phone, shouting for my father. Richard! Richard! Get in here! Natalie bought a house. She came back on the line, breathless. Oh, honey? That is wonderful. Where is it? Is it that cute colonial on Sycamore you looked at? No, I said, keeping my voice even. It's a condo, in Halcyon Tower. The silence this time was different. It was the silence of calculation. Halcyon Tower was not just a building in Alder Grove. It was the building. It was where the tech CEOs and the retired athletes lived. It was the building my father had tried to bid on a contracting job for in the 90s and lost. Halcyon, Richard's voice boomed in the background, now close to the phone. You bought in Halcyon? Which floor? 42nd. I said, penthouse level. He muttered. I could hear the gears turning in his head, calculating the square footage, the market value, the equity. That is impressive. Nat, really impressive. We always knew you were the smart one. Thank you. Dad. So, how many bedrooms? Elaine asked, her voice dropping into a tone I recognized. It was the tone she used when she was browsing an estate sale, looking for undervalued antiques. 3, I said. I regretted it the moment the word left my mouth. I should have said 2. I should have said 1 in a studio. 3, she repeated. That is plenty of space. And parking? You get passes, right? 2 spots. I said. And guest passes? Richard asked. For when we visit, the parking downtown is a nightmare. Valet, I said. Well, Elaine sighed, a sound of pure satisfaction. We are so proud of you. We need to come see it. We need to bless the space. You can't live in a place like that without family energy. When can we come? I looked around my empty living room. There was no furniture, just the sprawling hardwood and the scent of fresh paint. I felt a tightening in my chest, the old familiar constriction. I haven't unpacked. I said, I don't even have a couch yet. Nonsense. Elaine said, we don't need a couch. We're family. We'll bring dinner. Tomorrow night? I wanted to say no. I wanted to say, give me a month. Give me a year. But I knew the cost of saying no. It would be a week of cold shoulders, vague texts about my father's blood pressure, and voicemail messages where my mother sounded like she was weeping. Okay, I said, surrendering. Tomorrow night. But keep it simple. I'm serious. I have nothing here. We wouldn't dream of imposing, Richard said, his voice jovial. Just a simple toast to our girl's success. I hung up and stared at the phone. They hadn't asked how much it cost. They hadn't asked if I was happy. They had asked about the bedrooms and the parking. The trap was already set. I just didn't know how deep the teeth would go. The next evening, I stood in the center of my living room, feeling like an imposter in my own home. I had managed to buy 4 bar stools for the kitchen island and a high-end air mattress for the primary bedroom. But otherwise, the place was a cavern. The doorbell rang at 6 o'clock sharp. My parents did not arrive empty-handed, but they didn't bring housewarming gifts for me. They brought things that marked territory. My mother carried a large, ornate vase that she had bought at a clearance sale years ago, a hideous thing with gilded peacocks that I had explicitly said I hated. My father carried a tool bag, as if he intended to start renovating immediately. Natalie, Elaine cried, sweeping in and hugging me. She smelled of expensive perfume and hairspray. Oh, look at this. Look at this light. She bypassed me and went straight to the window, pressing her hand against the glass. Richard, look at the view. You can see the old warehouse district from here. Richard dropped his tool bag on my pristine quartz island with a clatter. Nice finishes, he grunted, tapping the counter with a knuckle. Solid stone, not the cheap stuff. Good resale value. Welcome, I said, closing the heavy door. Where is Brooke? Elaine asked, turning around and scanning the empty room. She said she was meeting us here. She's late, I said. As usual. Don't be like that, Elaine chided. waving a hand. Your sister has had a hard month. Her landlord is being a nightmare. She needs a little grace. Natalie. Especially now that you're living in a castle. I bit my tongue. I walked into the kitchen and opened the bottle of wine I had bought. Red, because my mother claimed white wine gave her migraines, though she drank it by the gallon at weddings. Brooke arrived 40 minutes later. She didn't knock. She buzzed up from the lobby, and when I opened the door, she breezed in like she was entering a hotel suite she had booked herself. Brooke was 29, 3 years younger than me, but she still carried the chaotic energy of a teenager. She was wearing a coat that looked new and shoes that I knew cost more than my weekly grocery budget, despite her constant claims of poverty. "Wow," she said, stopping in the foyer. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floors. She looked at the ceiling height. She pulled out her phone and immediately started recording a video, panning across the room. "Hey guys," she said to her imaginary audience on Instagram, "look at the new family pad. Views for days. #blessed Penthouse life." She posted it before she even said hello to me. I checked my own phone a minute later. There was the video. The caption read, "New beginnings for the Parker family. So grateful for this space." My name was nowhere in the post. "Hi, Brooke," I said, handing her a glass of wine. She looked up, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Nat, this place is insane. Seriously, how did you afford this? Did you rob a bank?" "I worked. Brooke, I saved." She rolled her eyes playfully, taking the wine. Bow ring. "But seriously, the light in here is perfect for content." We ate dinner standing around the kitchen island because there was nowhere else to sit. My parents had brought takeout, Thai food, but they had forgotten utensils. So we ate with the plastic forks I had salvaged from my moving box. The conversation started with the usual surface-level praise. My father admired the HVAC system. My mother asked about the neighbors. But I could feel the pivot coming. It was a physical sensation, like the drop in air pressure before a storm. It happened when I mentioned the second bedroom. "I'm thinking of turning the back room into a library," I said, poking at my pad thai. "I have enough books to fill 2 walls." Elaine laughed. A high, brittle sound. "A library? Natalie, honey, you don't need a library. That room has an ensuite bath. It's a full suite." "So?" I asked. "So, it's a waste to just fill it with dusty books," Richard said, wiping his mouth with a paper napkin. "That's a living space. It's my space." I said, "Of course it is," Elaine said soothingly. "But you know, we were talking on the way over. It's funny how things work out. You closing on this massive place right when Brooke is having such a crisis with her apartment." I put my fork down. I looked at Brooke. She was studying her wine glass, avoiding my gaze. "What crisis?" I asked. Brooke sighed. A tragic, heavy exhale. "My landlord. He's kicking me out. He says he needs to do emergency renovations because of some pipe issue or mold or something. He gave me 30 days, but he's making it impossible to stay there now. He's turning off the water during the day. It's harassment. Honestly, that's illegal." I said automatically, "If you have a lease, he can't just shut off utilities. You can file a complaint with the housing board." "I don't want to get into a legal battle," Brooke said quickly. "I just want out. It's bad energy." "So," Elaine continued, seizing the opening, "we were thinking, since you have this massive second bedroom just sitting here empty, and Brooke needs a safe place to land, it's perfect." It was not a question. It was a conclusion. I felt the blood rise in my cheeks. "No," I said. The word hung in the air, sharp and distinct. "Excuse me?" Richard said, his brow furrowing. I said no. I repeated, keeping my voice steady. "I am not having a roommate. I bought this place to live alone. I have lived with roommates for 10 years to save for this. I want my privacy." Elaine's face crumbled into a mask of hurt. "Roommate? Natalie. She is your sister, not a stranger. It's the same thing. Mom, I work from home half the time. I need quiet. And frankly, Brooke and I have very different lifestyles. What is that supposed to mean?" Brooke snapped, her head snapping up, It means you stay up until 3 in the morning and leave dishes in the sink. I said, and I get up at 5 and like my house clean. It doesn't work. We've tried it. That was college, Brooke cried. I'm an adult now. God, you are so uptight. Richard slammed his hand onto the counter. That is enough. Natalie, your sister is in a bind. We are family. Family helps each other. You have 3 empty bedrooms in a luxury tower, and you're going to let your sister stay in a moldy apartment with no water? She can stay with you, I pointed out. You have the guest room in the suburbs. It's too far from the city. Brooke whined. My whole life is downtown. All my auditions. My friends. I can't commute 40 minutes. It's temporary. Elaine pleaded, switching tactics from shame to bargaining. Just for a few weeks. Until she finds a new place. A month, tops. Just until she gets her deposit back and finds a new lease. I looked at Brooke. She was giving me the look. The wide, watery eyes she had used since she was 6 years old to get out of trouble. But I noticed something else. Her phone was sitting on the counter next to her wine glass. It buzzed. The screen lit up. Unknown caller. Brooke glanced at it, her hand twitching, then flipped the phone face down. A minute later, it buzzed again. Unknown caller. She hit the side button to silence it, her jaw tight. Why aren't you answering? I asked. Spam, she said too quickly. Just telemarketers. If it's a landlord issue. Shouldn't you be documenting calls? It's not him. She said, drop it, Nat. There were inconsistencies in her story. If the landlord was renovating, why did she need to leave immediately? If she was being harassed, why wasn't she angry instead of just eager to flee? And Brooke never ignored her phone. She lived on her phone. I'm sorry, I said, looking back at my father. The answer is no. I love you guys, but I'm not mixing family and housing. Not again. Richard stared at me. His face was red, the veins in his neck pulsing. I didn't raise you to be selfish, Natalie. Success changes people. I guess I didn't think it would change you this fast. I felt the guilt hit me like a physical blow. It was a well-aimed strike. He knew exactly where my armor was thin. It's not selfishness. Dad, it's boundaries. Boundaries, he scoffed. That's a therapy word for not caring about anyone but yourself. The rest of the dinner was excruciating. We ate in silence. Brooke sulked, scrolling aggressively on her phone. Elaine sniffled periodically, wiping invisible tears. Richard stared out the window, refusing to look at me. When they finally left at 9 o'clock, the relief was so intense I nearly collapsed. Elaine hugged me at the door, her body stiff. We'll talk about this later, she whispered. When you've had time to think and stop being so reactionary, there is nothing to think about, I said. She patted my cheek, a patronizing, pitying touch. You'll do the right thing. You always do. I locked the door behind them. I threw the deadbolt. I engaged the heavy brass latch. I walked through the penthouse, turning off the lights one by one until I was standing in the dark living room, illuminated only by the glow of the city below. The apartment was vast. It was beautiful. It was everything I had worked for. But as I stood there, looking at the empty space where my family had just been, I didn't feel the triumph I had felt in the escrow office. I felt cold. I thought about Brooke's phone buzzing with unknown numbers. I thought about the way my father had looked at the room, measuring it, calculating its utility. I thought about the we in my mother's sentences. I wasn't afraid of being alone in this big, empty apartment. I realized, with a sinking feeling in my gut, that I was afraid I wasn't actually alone at all. They hadn't heard no. They had heard, convince me. I walked to the window and pressed my forehead against the cool glass. The city lights blurred. I had built a fortress, yes, but I had forgotten that the people most likely to breach the walls were the ones who already knew the access codes. I needed furniture. I needed a lawyer. And I had a terrible feeling that I was going to need a lot more than a deadbolt. The week of peace was a mirage. I spent 7 days believing I had drawn a line in the sand that my family, however begrudgingly, had accepted. I unpacked my boxes. I bought a charcoal gray sectional that took 12 weeks to ship. but arrived in 3 days because Ava knew a guy at the warehouse. I sat on my balcony in the mornings with coffee, watching the fog roll off the river, telling myself that the knot in my stomach was just residual stress, not a premonition. I was wrong. It was Tuesday, just after 5 o'clock. I had left work early to meet a contractor about installing blackout shades in the bedroom. As I pushed through the revolving glass doors of Halcyon Tower, the smell of white tea and cedar, the building's signature scent, hit me. Usually, it relaxed me. Today, it was tainted by a familiar, cloying perfume, gardenia and regret. I stopped dead in the center of the lobby. Sitting on the velvet banquette near the concierge desk were my parents. Richard was reading a newspaper, legs crossed at the ankle, looking for all the world like he owned the building. Elaine was chatting animatedly with Matteo, the building manager, leaning over the marble desk with a dazzling, conspiratorial smile, and standing next to them, scrolling on her phone, was Brooke. But it wasn't their presence that made my blood turn to ice. It was what sat beside them. 2 massive, hard-shell rolling suitcases, a garment bag, and 3 cardboard boxes stacked neatly on a luggage cart. They were moving in. I stood there for 10 seconds, just watching them. They looked so comfortable, so entitled. They hadn't called. They hadn't asked. They had simply arrived, assuming that the sheer force of their presence would crumble my resistance. It was a strategy that had worked on me for 30 years. I took a breath, adjusted the strap of my bag, and walked forward. The click of my heels on the polished terrazzo alerted them. Elaine looked up, her face lighting up with a performance of pure joy. "Natalie! There she is!" She rushed over, arms open, as if we hadn't ended our last conversation with me locking them out. "Mom," I said, stepping back to avoid the hug. "What is this?" Richard folded his newspaper and stood up, smoothing his jacket. He didn't look guilty. He looked impatient, as if I were the one who was late. "We've been waiting 40 minutes. Natalie, you really should give your mother a spare key if you're going to be erratic with your schedule." I looked at Matteo. He was a young guy, professional and usually unflappable, but he looked relieved to see me. "Ms. Parker," Matteo said, stepping around the desk. "Your parents were just explaining the situation. I was about to call up to the unit to verify, but your mother said her phone died and she didn't have the code." "They are authorized guests," Elaine said quickly, waving a hand dismissively at Matteo. "I told you, we're family. We don't need to go through the formal clearance every time. They are not authorized guests," I said. The silence that followed was absolute. The soft jazz playing over the lobby speakers seemed to stop. Elaine's smile faltered, then fixed itself into something rigid. "Don't be silly. Natalie, Matteo, send the luggage cart up, would you? We can take the elevator." "No," I said. My voice was not loud, but it projected in the cavernous space. "Matteo, do not send the cart up. No one is going up." I turned to my parents. "I told you last week. I am not taking roommates. Why are there suitcases in my lobby?" Brooke finally looked up from her phone. She looked tired, her makeup slightly smudged, wearing a hoodie that swallowed her frame. She didn't look at me. She looked at the floor. "Mom said it was fine," Brooke mumbled. "I didn't say it was fine." I said, keeping my eyes on my father. I said no. Explicitly. Richard stepped into my personal space. He lowered his voice, but it was a stage whisper, designed to be heard while pretending to be private. "You are making a scene. Natalie, people are watching. Stop acting like a child and let your sister in. We can discuss the details upstairs. There is nothing to discuss." I said. I felt the old panic rising, the urge to soothe, to fix, to avoid the conflict. But I looked at the suitcases again. They hadn't just packed clothes. Those boxes were taped shut. This wasn't a visit. This was an occupation. If I let them up, they would never leave. "You need to leave," I said. Elaine gasped. Her hand flew to her chest. She looked around the lobby, checking for an audience, and finding a few residents waiting for the elevator. She turned on the waterworks. It was instantaneous. Her eyes filled, her chin wobbled, and a sob ripped out of her throat. I can't believe this, she wailed. Her voice echoed off the marble walls. I can't believe my own daughter would leave her sister on the street. After everything we've done for you, after everything we sacrificed. Residents turned to stare. A man in a suit looked at me with open disgust. Mom, stop, I hissed. She is homeless, Elaine cried. Louder now. She has nowhere to go. And you have a palace upstairs. How can you be so cruel? Richard, do something. Richard glared at me, his face turning a mottled red. Look at what you're doing to your mother. You are humiliating us, in front of strangers. Natalie, have you no shame? I stood my ground. Though my knees were shaking, the shame was burning me. Yes, but it was their shame, not mine. They were trying to smear it on me like tar. She is not homeless, I said, keeping my voice level. She can live with you. We told you. Richard snapped. The commute doesn't work for her. That is not my problem. I said. Brooke stepped forward then. She dropped the handle of her suitcase and looked at me, her eyes wet. Nat, please, it's just for a month. I swear, I just need to get on my feet. I've already moved my other stuff into the storage unit here. I froze. What? I asked. Brooke blinked, realizing she had slipped. The storage unit. In the basement. I booked it yesterday. My head spun. Halcyon Tower had private storage units, but they were restricted to residents. You couldn't book one unless you were on a lease or a deed. How did you book a unit? I asked. You're not a resident, Elaine interjected, wiping her eyes instantly. We just used your information. Natalie? God, it's just a storage unit. Don't be so petty. We put it on your account so Brooke could drop off her furniture this morning. The truck already came and went. They had been here this morning. While I was at work, they had used my name. I turned to Mateo. Did you authorize a storage unit for Unit 42A today? Mateo looked pale. I saw the request in the portal. Ms. Parker, it came from your login. I assumed it was you. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. This wasn't a desperate family looking for a favor. This was a heist. They had my login. They had been planning this for days, waiting for me to be out of the building to move the heavy furniture in, then ambushing me with the suitcases when the hard part was already done. Get out, I said. Natalie, Richard started, raising a finger. I cut him off. I mean it. Get out. Take the suitcases. Take the boxes. If you don't leave, I am asking Mateo to call the police for trespassing. Elaine let out a shriek. You wouldn't. Try me. I said. I pulled out my phone. I didn't dial 911, but I held it up, my thumb hovering over the screen. The threat was enough. Richard saw the look in my eyes, a look he hadn't seen before. It was the absence of negotiation. He grabbed the handle of the nearest suitcase. Fine, he spat. Fine. If you want to be this way, if you want to destroy this family over a guest room, then fine. But don't come crying to us when you're alone in that glass box. Come on. Elaine, he barked. Elaine sobbed all the way to the revolving door, a theatrical, mournful sound that ensured everyone in the lobby knew she was the victim. Brooke lingered for a second, looking at me with a mix of resentment and fear. You're a bitch. Nat, she whispered. Then she turned and followed them, the wheels of her suitcase clacking loudly against the stone floor. I didn't move until they were in their car. I watched through the glass as Richard aggressively loaded the trunk of his Lincoln Navigator. Only when the taillights disappeared into the downtown traffic did I turn back to Mateo. Ms. Parker, I am so sorry, Mateo stammered. They knew so much about the unit. I thought, it's not your fault. Mateo, I said, though my voice sounded hollow to my own ears. But we need to fix this. Now. I went upstairs. But I didn't take off my coat. I went straight to my laptop. My hands were trembling so badly I had to type my password 3 times. I logged into the Halcyon resident portal. There it was, under the tab labeled Household Members. There was a new entry, added yesterday at 10:14 a.m., Brooke Parker, relationship, sister, status, permanent resident. They hadn't just booked storage, they had tried to register her as a resident. If I hadn't caught it, if Mateo had simply approved it, she would have had rights to a key fob. She would have had legal standing in the building. I checked the activity log. The request had been made from an IP address I recognized. My parents' house in the suburbs. I knew my password wasn't complicated. It was a variation of my childhood street address, something my mother could have easily guessed or remembered from the time I helped her set up her Netflix account. I felt a wave of violations so acute, it made me nauseous. I changed the password immediately to a random string of 20 characters. Then I enabled two-factor authentication. Then I emailed Mateo. Subject: Security Alert. Unit 42. Mateo. Please flag my account immediately. No one is authorized to access my unit. Request keys. Or book amenities except me. Please remove Brooke Parker from the pending resident list. The storage unit booked earlier today was unauthorized. I will arrange to have the contents removed. Natalie. I sat back, staring at the screen. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I expected a phone call. I expected Richard to scream at me. Instead, I got an email. It arrived 20 minutes later. The subject line was in all caps. Family understanding. It was from Elaine, Natalie. I am writing this because I am too heartbroken to speak. Your father is beside himself. We are sitting in a diner with your sister, wondering where we went wrong raising you. You seem to have forgotten the conversation we had last week. You explicitly promised to support Brooke during this hardship. We have texts. Natalie. You can't just change your mind because you're in a bad mood and embarrass us in public. See attached. We expect you to apologize and send over a key by tomorrow morning. We will forgive this outburst if you make it right. Mom. My stomach twisted. I opened the attachment. It was a screenshot of a text message conversation. The contact name at the top was Retaliation P. The gray bubble, ostensibly from me, read, I know it's a lot to ask, but yeah, she can stay. I just need a few days to get the place ready. Tell her to come Tuesday. The blue response from Elaine read, Oh, thank God. You are a lifesaver. Honey, we love you. I stared at the image. The room seemed to tilt. I had never sent that text. I had never even thought those words. For a second, a terrifying second, I questioned my own sanity. Had I been drunk? Had I blacked out? Then I looked closer. The font was wrong. I have used an iPhone for 10 years. The default font is San Francisco. It has a specific weight and spacing. The font in the screenshot was slightly different. Roboto. The default font for Android. My mother used a Samsung, and the timestamp. It said Tuesday, 10:14 a.m. But last Tuesday at 10:14 a.m., I was in a deposition for work. My phone had been in a locker outside the secure conference room. I had the log to prove it. She had faked it. My mother, or perhaps Brooke, had created a fake contact named Natalie P. on one of their phones, texted themselves, and taken a screenshot. They had manufactured consent. Why? To make me feel crazy? To guilt me? No. As I looked at the email again, I realized it wasn't written for me. It was written for an audience. It was written to be forwarded. If they decided to sue me, or if they tried to show this to the building management to prove they had a verbal contract. This was their evidence. They were building a case. I didn't reply. I picked up my phone and called Ava. She picked up on the first ring. Hey, homeowner, how's the view? I need a lawyer, I said. Ava's tone changed instantly. What happened? My parents. They tried to move in. They faked a text message where I agreed to it. They accessed my building portal. Ava, I need someone who understands property law and crazy families. I'm texting you a number right now. Ava said, her name is Tessa Grant. She's expensive. She's mean. And she eats landlords for breakfast. Call her. I called Tessa Grant at 7 o'clock at night. To my surprise, she answered. She listened to my story without interrupting, her silence on the line sharp and attentive. When I finished describing the fake text and the lobby ambush, Tessa hummed, You have a problem. Ms. Parker, she said. Her voice was raspy, like dry leaves. I know. I said, They're relentless. It's not just that, Tessa said. It's the tenancy laws in this state. If your sister had stayed in that unit for more than 3 consecutive nights, or if she receives mail at your address, she can claim tenancy, even without a lease, even without paying rent. But I own the place, I said. Doesn't matter, Tessa said. Judges hate kicking people out onto the street, especially family. If she establishes residency, you have to formally evict her. That takes 6 months. 6 months where she lives in your house, eats your food, and you can't lock her out. My blood ran cold. That's why they wanted the mail, I whispered. Last week. My mom asked if Brooke could get mail there. Smart, Tessa said. Manipulative, but smart. Listen to me closely. Do not let them in. Not for dinner, not to use the bathroom. If they get a toothbrush in that bathroom, you are compromised. What do I do about the email? The fake text? Ignore it for now, Tessa commanded. Do not engage in an emotional debate. We respond with facts. You need to send a formal notice of non-permission. It needs to be written, dated, and sent via certified mail and email. It states clearly that no license to occupy has been granted. And the storage unit? Clear it out, Tessa said. Put their junk on the curb or ship it to their house, but get it off your property. If her furniture is in your building, she has a foothold. I hung up the phone and felt a strange shift inside me. The fear was still there, but it was hardening into something else. Determination. I wasn't a daughter anymore. I was a plaintiff. I spent the next 3 hours turning my penthouse into a fortress. I went to the hardware store before it closed and bought a doorbell camera and a smart lock that logged every entry and exit to the second. I installed them myself, stripping the screws in my haste, but I got them on. I set the camera to record 24/7. Then, I sat down and drafted the letter Tessa had outlined. To Elaine, Richard, and Brooke Parker. This letter serves as formal notice that you do not have permission to occupy, store personal items in, or access the premises at Unit 42A, Halcyon Tower. No tenancy has been established. No agreement, verbal or written, exists regarding Brooke Parker's residency. Any personal property currently stored in the building's basement without my authorization will be removed at your expense within 24 hours. Please do not attempt to access the building without my express invitation. Future attempts to bypass security will be treated as trespassing. Natalie Parker. I read it over. It was cold. It was clinical. It broke my heart to write it to the people who had raised me. But then I looked at the screenshot of the fake text message again. I looked at the timestamp, 10:14 a.m. The exact moment they were trying to steal my home from under me. I hit send. The response didn't come to me directly. It came to the world. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of notifications. My phone was vibrating off the nightstand. I opened Instagram. Brooke had posted a photo. It was a selfie of her, crying, sitting on what looked like a motel bed. The lighting was harsh, emphasizing her tear-streaked mascara. The caption was a novel. I never thought I'd be posting this. I'm honestly so embarrassed. Last night, my own sister turned me away. I'm going through the hardest time of my life. Unsafe housing, health issues, and I thought family was a safe harbor. I was wrong. I was literally left on the curb with my suitcase while she went up to her multi-million-dollar penthouse. It hurt so much to realize that money changes people. I remember when we shared a bunk bed and promised to always take care of each other. I guess that promise expires when you get rich. Hashtag family trauma, hashtag homeless, hashtag heartbroken, hashtag real colors. I scrolled through the comments. They were a landslide of sympathy. Oh my God. Brooke, I am so sorry. That is disgusting behavior. Karma will get her. Stay strong. Babe, you don't need toxic people like that. And then, a comment from my cousin Sarah. I can't believe Natalie would do this. We were all rooting for her, unfollowing. My mother had liked the post. I sat in my beautiful, silent kitchen, the morning light pouring in over the marble I had paid for with years of my life. I felt the sting of it, the public shaming, the distortion of reality. They were painting a masterpiece where I was the villain, the greedy sister who chose luxury over love. I wanted to scream. I wanted to reply and post the fake text, the storage unit log, the truth, but I heard Tessa's voice in my head. Do not engage emotionally. Build the wall. I put the phone down. I didn't comment. I didn't like the post. I didn't call Brooke to beg her to take it down. Instead, I opened my laptop and pulled up the building's visitor log that Matteo had sent me. I started a spreadsheet. Date, time, incident. I entered the lobby ambush. I entered the storage unit fraud. I entered the fake text. Let them have the likes, I whispered to the empty room. I'll keep the receipts. I was done playing the reliable daughter. If they wanted a war, they were going to find out that I hadn't just bought a penthouse, I had bought a vantage point, and from up here, I could see everything they were trying to hide. I took a sip of my coffee. It was cold, but I drank it anyway. I had a feeling I needed to get used to the temperature dropping. 2 days after the social media storm, the silence broke, but it was not the chaotic, wailing noise of my mother. It was the heavy, calculated tread of my father. Richard Parker did not buzz the intercom. He did not call. He simply waited. I found him sitting in the lobby of Halcyon Tower at 7 o'clock in the evening. He was not making a scene this time. He was sitting in one of the high-backed leather wing chairs near the fireplace, his hands folded over his knee, watching the residents filter in from the rain. He looked like a statesman. He looked reasonable. To anyone walking by, he was just a distinguished older gentleman waiting for a dinner date. When he saw me, he stood up. He didn't smile, but he didn't scowl either. He wore the expression he used to wear when he was about to close a deal with a difficult client, a mix of patience and pity. "Natalie," he said, nodding his head. I stopped near the security desk. Matteo was on duty again, his eyes darting between us, ready to intervene. I held up a hand to signal I was okay. "What are you doing here, Dad?" I asked. "I sent a letter. You are not supposed to be here. I received your letter," Richard said. His voice was calm, almost soothing. It was very formal, very legal. You have certainly learned how to draft a document. He took a step closer, staying just outside the radius of my personal space. "I am not here to fight. Nat, I am here to fix this. Your mother is a wreck. Brooke is Brooke, but this has gone too far. We are a family, not opposing counsel." I tightened my grip on my laptop bag. "If you want to fix it, stop trying to move people into my house." Richard sighed, looking around the lobby as if checking for eavesdroppers. "Look, we handled this poorly. We assumed that was wrong. But we need to make a deal, a real deal, business to business. If that is how you want to play it." I waited. The idea of making a deal with my father usually meant I gave something up and he took the credit. "Brooke needs the room," he said, dropping his voice. "Just the room, no meals, no money from you. She just needs an address in this building." "Why?" I asked. Richard ignored the question. "Here is the offer. You let her stay for 6 months. In exchange, your mother and I are willing to forgive the balance of the loan." I blinked. The lobby seemed to tilt slightly to the left. "The loan?" I repeated. "What loan?" Richard gave me a knowing look, a look that suggested we were both in on a secret joke. "The money, Natalie, the money you borrowed from us back in 2018, and the help with your tuition before that. We have been keeping a tally. You know, we never pressed you for it because we wanted you to get on your feet, but it is a significant sum, somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000. I stared at him. I felt a buzzing in my ears, a high-pitched static that made it hard to focus. "I never borrowed money from you," I said slowly. "In 2018. I paid for your roof replacement. I wrote the check to the contractor directly. $12,000. Richard waved a hand dismissively. "That was a contribution to the household. You were staying with us for a few weeks between leases. It was rent." "I stayed for 4 days. I said, "That is $3,000 a night." "Details," Richard said, his tone hardening just a fraction. "The point is, there is a ledger. We have supported you for years. We are willing to wipe that slate clean. 0 balance. We will call it even. All you have to do is give Brooke a key. I looked at my father, really looked at him. I saw the gray at his temples, the slight tremor in his hand that he tried to hide. And I saw the lie. It wasn't just a lie. It was a rewriting of history. He was trying to sell me a debt I didn't owe to buy access to a home he didn't own. There is no ledger, Dad, I said, my voice shaking with a sudden, cold rage. Or if there is, it goes the other way. Richard's face tightened. He buttoned his coat. Think about it. Natalie, don't be rash. Financial freedom is a valuable thing. You don't want a debt like that hanging over you, especially with a new mortgage. We could formalize the demand for repayment if we had to, but we don't want to do that. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a sealed envelope. He placed it on the marble table beside the chair. Just think about it. For Brooke? He turned and walked out of the revolving doors, into the rainy night, leaving me standing there with the ghost of a debt wrapping its fingers around my throat. I didn't go upstairs immediately. I went to the business center on the second floor, a glass-walled room that was empty at this hour. I sat down, opened my laptop, and called Tessa. She answered on the second ring. He says I owe them $40,000. I said without preamble. He offered to forgive it if I let Brooke in. Tessa didn't gasp. She didn't ask who. She just shifted into gear. Do you owe them money? She asked. Is there a promissory note? An IOU? A handshake deal for tuition? No. I said, I paid my own tuition. I had scholarships and loans that I paid off myself. I have the discharge papers and the money in 2018. I gave that to them. They were behind on the mortgage. They said they were going to lose the house. Did you sign anything when you gave them the money? Tessa asked. I tried to remember. It was 5 years ago. I had been 27, terrified that my parents would be homeless. I had drained my emergency fund. I don't think so. I said, I just wrote the check. Okay, Tessa said. Here is what we are going to do. You are going to pull your credit report. Right now, all 3 bureaus. If he is talking about formalizing a demand, he might believe he has paper on you, or he might have created some. My stomach turned over. Created some. I logged into the credit monitoring site I used. I usually only check the score, a healthy 780, but tonight I downloaded the full PDF report. I scrolled past my mortgage, my credit cards, my student loans which were marked paid in full, and then I stopped. Under the section labeled Inquiries, there was a hard pull from 6 months ago. Creditor, Redcrest Interiors, Group LLC. Purpose, Consumer Credit Application. Redcrest Interiors was my parents' design firm. I scrolled down to open accounts. There it was, a line of credit, opened in November of last year. Limit, $5,000. Balance, $4,800. The status was current, meaning someone was making the minimum payments to keep it from flagging, but the utilization was nearly 100%. I felt like I was going to throw up. Tessa, I whispered, there is a trade line. It is from their company. Tell me, she commanded. I read her the details. Okay, she said, her voice dropping an octave. Natalie, listen to me. This is identity theft, but it is also a specific kind of fraud. If they opened a line of credit in your name through their business, they are likely using it to prop up their books. They are listing you as a debtor to their company to inflate their assets. But Richard said I owed them $40,000. I said, this is only 5. The 5 is just what is reported to the bureau, Tessa said. If they have cooked their books to show that you owe them $40,000, they might be using that fake asset to secure other loans. They are leveraging you. You are not a daughter to them right now. Natalie, you are a balance sheet entry. I closed my eyes. I thought of the gifts I had given them over the years. The roof, the car repairs, the bridge loans, to make payroll. I need to see my bank statements. I said, all of them. Go back 5 years, Tessa said. And Natalie? Do not confront them yet. If you tip them off that you know about the credit line, they might shred everything. We need to document it first. I spent the next 4 hours in the business center. I downloaded 5 years of statements from my bank. I exported them into a spreadsheet. I searched for every transfer to Elaine or Richard Parker. There were dozens. August 2019, $2,500. December 2020, $1,200. March 2021, $4,000. I remembered the March transfer. My mother had called me crying, saying the IRS was going to freeze their business accounts if they didn't make a quarterly payment. I had sent the money within 10 minutes. I looked at the transaction detail for that transfer. In the memo line of the digital check, I had written, "Loan for taxes." But when I looked at the image of the cashed check, which my bank archived, I saw something written in the endorsement area on the back. In my mother's looping handwriting, "Gift for family expenses," I checked the others. Almost every significant check I had written them had been endorsed with notes like gift, donation, or holiday money. They had been careful, systematically careful. By labeling these transfers as gifts, they ensured I couldn't claim them as debts they owed me. In the eyes of the law, I was just a generous daughter, but by opening a credit line in my name, they had manufactured a debt that I owed them. They had inverted reality. In their narrative, I was the leech, and they were the benefactors. I sat back in the ergonomic chair, the hum of the server rack in the corner the only sound. I felt a profound sense of grief. It wasn't the money. I could lose the money. It was the architecture of the betrayal. They had been building this trap while I was sitting at their dinner table. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was late, past 11. Brooke. I stared at the screen. I didn't want to answer. I wanted to block them all and move to a different continent. But Tessa's advice echoed in my head. Build the timeline. I swiped right. Hello? Nat? Brooke's voice was small, tinny. She sounded like she was in a bathroom or a closet. There was an echo. What do you want? Brooke? I need to talk. Real talk. Not the stuff Mom and Dad are saying. I am listening. I said, I'm in trouble. Nat, like, actual trouble. Not just landlord trouble. I waited. I could hear her breathing, shallow and fast. It's Dylan, she said. Dylan Kessler was Brooke's boyfriend of 2 years. He was a brand consultant, which as far as I could tell meant he wore expensive sneakers and unemployed people paid him to tell them how to use TikTok. I had met him twice. He had limp handshakes and eyes that never stayed still. What about him? I asked. We made a mistake, Brooke whispered. A financial thing. He had this opportunity, this crypto arbitrage thing. I don't understand it. Honestly, but he needed a second signer. I closed my eyes, and you signed. She made a noise that was half sob, half laugh. I signed everything. Nat, I thought we were going to be rich. I thought I could finally show Dad that I was the smart one. How much? I asked. I don't know the total, she said, but people are calling. Men are calling. They call my cell. They call the house phone at Mom and Dad's. That's why Mom is freaking out. She's terrified Dad will find out how bad it is. Does Dad know? He knows some of it. He knows we owe money. But he thinks it's just credit cards. He doesn't know about the private lenders. Private lenders. That was a polite word for loan sharks. Is that why you need the penthouse? I asked. Brooke hesitated. Dylan said, he said if we had a secure building, a place with a doorman, they couldn't get to us. And if we had a rich address, maybe they would give us more time. They think we have assets. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. So you want to use my home as a shield? I asked. You want to bring people who are chasing you for money to the place where I sleep? No, Brooke cried. I mean, yes, but, Nat, please, I am scared. I saw a car parked outside Mom's house yesterday. A black sedan. Just sitting there. I can't stay in the suburbs. It's too open. I need layers between me and the street. I looked at the glass wall of the business center. I saw my own reflection. Pale, exhausted, but rigid. Meet me. I said, what? Meet me tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock. The coffee press on 4th. Come alone. If you bring Dylan, I leave. If you bring Mom, I leave. Okay, she said instantly. Okay, I'll be there. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in my bed listening to the wind whip around the tower. I thought about the 3 keys on my nightstand. I had thought they locked the world out. I was wrong. They just locked me in with the truth. The coffee press was busy at 8 in the morning, filled with the clatter of ceramic and the hiss of steam wands. I took a table in the back, facing the door. Brooke arrived at 8:15. She looked terrible. She was wearing sunglasses indoors, and her hair was pulled back in a messy bun that wasn't stylishly messy. It was neglected. She wore a trench coat belted tightly at the waist. She sat down, keeping the sunglasses on. "Take them off." "Brooke," I said gently. She slid them up onto her head. Her eyes were rimmed with red, the skin beneath them bruised with fatigue. She looked 5 years older than she had at the dinner party a week ago. "I ordered you a latte," I said, sliding the cup toward her. She wrapped her hands around it like it was a life raft. "Thanks. So," I said, "tell me exactly what you signed." Brooke looked down at the table. It was a promissory note and a confession of judgment. I winced. A confession of judgment was a legal nuclear weapon. It meant the creditor could bypass a trial and go straight to seizing assets if a payment was missed. "Who holds the note?" I asked. "A company called Apex Holdings," she said, "but the guy who calls his name is Vince. And how does this involve Mom and Dad?" Brooke took a shaky sip of coffee. "Dylan used Red Crest Interiors as a guarantor." My heart stopped. "He did what?" "He had some old tax documents of theirs," Brooke whispered. "From when he helped Dad set up his iPad. He forged Richard's signature as a co-signer." I sat back. The breath knocked out of me. This was catastrophic. If this debt went bad, and it clearly already had, this Apex Holdings could go after my parents' business. They could seize the inventory, the accounts, everything. "Does Dad know Dylan forged his signature?" I asked. "No," Brooke said, tears spilling over. "He thinks the collectors are calling because I used the company credit card too much. If he finds out Dylan forged his name, he'll kill him, and he'll disown me." "So the plan," I said, trying to assemble the puzzle pieces, "is to move into my penthouse to hide from Vince, while Dad tries to blackmail me into giving you the room so he can keep you close and control the narrative?" Brooke nodded miserably. "And there's one more thing." "Of course there is. Dylan told Vince that his sister-in-law just bought a unit in Halcyon Tower. He told them you were going to invest, that you were going to cover the liquidity gap." I felt a surge of adrenaline so sharp my vision blurred. "He sold me out," I said. "He pointed the sharks at me." "He bought us time," Brooke pleaded. "He just said you were considering it. That's why we need to move in. If we are in the building, it looks like the deal is real. Vince will back off. And when he realizes I'm not paying," I asked, "what happens then?" "Brooke, when he realizes you lied, and I'm not a walking checkbook." Brooke didn't answer. She just wept silently. I looked out the window of the cafe. Across the street, standing near a newsstand, was a man. He was wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap. He wasn't reading the paper. He was looking at the cafe. "Is that him?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Brooke froze. "Who?" "The man across the street. Blue cap, gray jacket." Brooke didn't turn her head. She just went rigid. "Is he looking at his phone?" "No, he's looking at us." She started to shake. "Oh God, that's not Vince. That's the guy who follows Dylan." I looked at the man again. He took a drag of a cigarette, then dropped it and crushed it under his heel. He caught my eye. He didn't look away. He stared right at me for a long, uncomfortable second, then turned and walked down the block, disappearing into the crowd. I looked back at my sister. She wasn't just a mess. She was radioactive. "You can't live with me." "Brooke," I said. Brooke grabbed my wrist across the table. Her grip was desperate, clammy. "Please, Nat, they won't hurt you. They just want money." I pulled my hand away. "I'm not going to let you bring this into my building. I am not going to let you endanger my neighbors. And I'm certainly not going to play along with Dylan's con." I stood up. "Where are you going?" Brooke cried. "I am going to fix this." I said, "But not the way you want." I walked out of the cafe. I didn't look back at my sister. I walked 2 blocks, checked to make sure I wasn't being followed, and then ducked into a bookstore to catch my breath. My phone chimed. It was a text from Richard. He hadn't waited for me to consider his offer. He had moved to the next phase of the assault. Natalie, since you have not responded to my generous offer regarding the loan forgiveness, we are forced to take steps to protect the family assets. We have spoken to our attorney, given that your down payment was accumulated while you were living subsidized by us, and given the intermingling of funds over the years, we will be filing a motion to contest the title of the penthouse. We are claiming it as constructive trust family property. This will freeze the asset. You won't be able to sell, refinance, or modify the deed until it is settled. It could take years, or you can just give Brooke a key. Your choice. I stared at the screen. A constructive trust. It was a legal concept used when someone holds property that rightfully belongs to another due to a breach of fiduciary duty. It was absurd. It was a lie. I had bank statements proving I paid for everything, but the threat wasn't about winning in court. It was about tying me up in litigation until I suffocated. It was about freezing me. They were bluffing, but it was a terrifyingly competent bluff. I forwarded the text to Tessa. Is this real? I typed. Her reply came in 30 seconds. It is a nuisance suit. We can beat it, but they are declaring war. I stood in the fiction section of the bookstore, surrounded by stories of heroes and villains. I realized then that my parents didn't want my home. They didn't even really care about Brooke's safety. They wanted leverage. The penthouse was just a poker chip. They needed to control it so they could show the world, and their creditors, that the Parker family was still solvent, still powerful, still united. I was just the rebellious employee who had run off with the company asset. I took a deep breath. The panic I had felt in the lobby was gone. The fear I had felt looking at the man across the street was cooling into something hard and sharp. They wanted a war of confusion. They wanted to drown me in guilt, vague debts, and emotional blackmail. Fine, I would give them clarity. I walked out of the bookstore and hailed a cab. To the Hall of Records. I told the driver I was going to pull every lien, every judgment, and every UCC filing on Redcrest Interiors. I was going to find out exactly how deep the rot went, and then I was going to buy the shovel they were using to dig their own graves. I wasn't the daughter anymore. I wasn't the sister. I was the auditor, and I was about to open the books. The binder was 3 inches thick, bound in navy blue leather, and weighed as much as a brick. It had been sitting on my kitchen island for 2 weeks, ignored in favor of unpacking boxes and putting out fires. But after my trip to the Hall of Records, I looked at it differently. It was no longer just a welcome packet. It was a weapon. Halcyon Residences Association. Covenants, conditions, and restrictions. I spent a Tuesday night reading every page. The language was dry, dense, and litigious. Exactly the kind of language my father hated, because he couldn't charm his way out of it. I learned that the building was governed by a board of 5 unit owners. I learned that the management contract with Mateo's company was up for renewal in 2 months, meaning the staff was currently hypersensitive to resident complaints. And I learned about Article 7, Section 4, the right to quiet enjoyment and security. It stated, in unambiguous terms, that any resident could request the permanent barring of non-residents who posed a threat to the peaceful integrity of the unit. It didn't require a police report. It didn't require a restraining order. It just required a written request to the board and the management company. I didn't sleep that night. I printed 3 photographs, one of Richard, looking stern in his favorite blazer, one of Elaine, smiling at a gala, one of Brooke, a selfie she had sent me a month ago. The next morning, I walked down to the lobby. The air conditioning was humming, cool and sterile. Mateo was at the desk, sorting mail. He looked up, his expression wary. He was still waiting for the other shoe to drop after the storage unit incident. I have a formal request, I said, sliding a manila envelope across the marble counter. Mateo opened it. He looked at the photos, then up at me. His eyes were wide. These are my parents and my sister. I said. My voice was steady. though my hands were clenched in my pockets, effective immediately. They are on the no trespass list. They are not to be announced. They are not to be allowed in the elevator. If they attempt to enter the premises, security is to ask them to leave. If they refuse, you are to call the police. Mateo swallowed hard. Ms. Parker, are you sure? It is a very serious step. I am sure. I said, I am citing Article 7, Section 4 of the bylaws. I am filing this as a security concern. Mateo nodded slowly. He didn't ask questions. He typed something into his terminal, scanned the photos, and looked back at me with a new kind of respect. Or perhaps it was fear. It is done. Ms. Parker, the night staff will be briefed. I walked out of the building to go to work, feeling a strange mixture of nausea and liberation. I had just banned my own blood from my home. It felt like an amputation, painful, but necessary to stop the rot from spreading. 2 days later, the test came. I was working from home, reviewing contracts for a client. When the intercom buzzed, I checked the camera feed. Elaine was standing in the vestibule. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. She was holding a wicker basket wrapped in cellophane and a yellow ribbon. She looked like the picture of maternal warmth. I pressed the talk button. Hello? Mom? Natalie? Her voice crackled through the speaker, bright and hopeful. I know you're working, but I just wanted to drop this off. It is the blueberry muffins you like. From the bakery on 12th, and I brought those swatches for the curtains we talked about. We never talked about curtains. I said, oh, don't be silly. I just want to come up for 5 minutes. I promise. No drama. Your father isn't even here. Just us girls. I looked at the screen. She was smiling, but her eyes were scanning the lobby behind the glass, looking for a way in. She was charming the camera, performing for an audience of one. You can't come up. Mom. Her smile faltered. Natalie, please, I have a gift. Leave it with the concierge. I said, Natalie, stop this. This is ridiculous. I am your mother. Open the door. No. The change was instant. The warmth evaporated from her face, replaced by a look of sheer, icy venom. She stepped closer to the camera, her breath fogging the lens. You are a cold-hearted little girl, she hissed. You think you are so special in your glass tower. You are punishing Brooke just to punish us. You are trying to hurt your father because you are jealous that we are helping her and not you. I didn't answer. I watched her. It is not about safety, she shouted, not caring who heard her now. It is about control. You have always wanted to be the one who decides who gets what. Well, guess what, Natalie? You are going to die alone in that apartment, and no one will care because you pushed everyone away. Security stepped into the frame. A large man in a dark blazer put a hand up. Ma'am, you need to leave. Elaine turned on him, her basket swinging. Don't touch me. I am leaving. She threw the basket on the floor. I watched as the cellophane tore and the muffins spilled across the pristine tile of the vestibule. She stormed out, the yellow ribbon trailing behind her like a dead snake. I turned off the monitor. I sat in my silence. Punishing Brooke to punish us. The words stuck. She truly believed it. She couldn't conceive of a world where I was acting in self-defense. In her mind, I was the aggressor. I was the one holding the line. So I must be the one causing the pain. I called Tessa. I need the forensic guy. I said, now. Tessa sent me a contact card. Marcus Vance. Forensic Accounting Fraud Examination. Marcus was a man who looked like he had been carved out of gray stone. He met me at a diner halfway between my office and the tower. He didn't order coffee. He opened a laptop and turned the screen toward me. Tessa told me to look into Red Crest Interiors, he said. His voice was a low rumble. Specifically, looking for liquidity issues and debt structuring. And? I asked. And? Marcus said, tapping a key. It is a house of cards, but the wind is already blowing. He pulled up a spreadsheet. They have unpaid vendor balances going back 11 months, he said. They owe $12,000 to a lumber yard in the South District. They owe $8,000 to a fabric importer. But the big one is a cabinet manufacturer in Ohio. They owe $45,000. $45,000. I repeated. That was roughly the amount Richard had claimed I owed him. The manufacturer has already sent a demand letter. Marcus said, I found a filing in the county clerk's office. They are preparing to sue for breach of contract and fraud. They are alleging that your father ordered materials knowing he couldn't pay for them. Fraud, I whispered. If they sue. Marcus continued. Redcrest will have to declare bankruptcy. But here's the kicker. Your father has personal guarantees on almost all of these vendor contracts. If the business goes under, they come for his assets, the house, the cars. And if he has access to my penthouse? I asked. If he can claim he has a constructive trust. Or if Brooke is living there? Then he can claim residency, Marcus said. Or he can claim that family assets are commingled. It muddies the water. It makes it harder for creditors to seize things because they have to untangle what belongs to whom. He doesn't want your penthouse to live in. Natalie. He wants it as a bunker. I stared at the numbers. It was worse than I thought. They weren't just bad with money. They were insolvent. They were drowning. And they saw me as a life raft. But instead of asking for help, they were trying to hijack the boat. I realized then why Richard was so desperate to get Brooke in. It wasn't about Brooke. It was about establishing a footprint. If they had a key, if they had mail, they could list my address on their bankruptcy forms. They could drag me into the wreckage. I need to talk to him. I said, Don't, Marcus warned. Let the lawyers handle it. No, I said. I need to look him in the eye. I didn't go to their house. I caught Richard coming out of his office downtown. It was a small storefront on a side street, the windows displaying dusty samples of crown molding. He looked tired. His shoulders were slumped, his tie loosened. When he saw me waiting by his car, he straightened up, the mask of the successful businessman sliding back into place. Natalie, he said, I assume you are here to accept my offer. I stood 5 feet away from him. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I just asked the question that had been burning a hole in my chest. Why do you need my address so badly? Dad? He blinked. I told you. For Brooke. For safety. No. I said, that is not it. Why my address? Why not a rental? Why not a hotel? Why do you need to be inside my walls? Richard's jaw worked. He looked away. Down the street. It is family property. Natalie, we just want to keep the family together. Stop lying. I said, I know about the cabinet maker in Ohio. His head snapped back around. His eyes were wide, terrified. For a split second, I saw the panic. I saw the sleepless nights and the ringing phones. Who told you that? He whispered. I know about the demand letter. I said, I know you are personally liable. Richard's face flushed a deep, violent red. He took a step toward me, his finger raised. You have no business snooping in my company, he shouted. I built that company from nothing. I fed you with that company. Why do you need my address? I asked again. Relentless. Because it is the only thing we have left, he screamed. The silence that followed was deafening. He stood there, chest heaving, realizing what he had admitted. He didn't need a guest room. He needed an asset. He needed to show the world, and the courts, that the Parker family still held high-value real estate. He needed to hide behind my success because his own was a hollow shell. I looked at him, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I felt pity. I am not your asset, Dad, I said quietly. And neither is my home. I turned to walk away. Natalie, he called after me, his voice cracking. You can't leave us like this. They are going to take the house. I kept walking. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might turn into a pillar of salt. The next day, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, thinking it was one of Brooke's creditors, but something made me pick up. Hello? Hey, Nat, it's Dylan. I froze. Dylan Kessler, the boyfriend, the architect of the crypto disaster. Don't call me Nat. I said, right, sorry. Look, I just wanted to reach out. Man to man. You know? I am not a man, Dylan, and I'm not your friend. I know, he said, his voice rushing. But look, Things are getting kind of heavy over here. Brooke is losing it. Your dad is losing it. I thought maybe we could just sit down, hash this out. I feel like there is a lot of miscommunication." "There is no miscommunication." I said, "You forged a signature. You are in debt to loan sharks, and you are trying to use my apartment as a shield." Dylan laughed, a nervous, hacking sound. "Whoa, whoa. Loan sharks? That is a strong word." "It's just private equity, alternative financing. Look, Natalie, I thought you would be cool. I thought, you're a businesswoman. You understand leverage. I understand fraud." I said, Dylan sighed, "Look, I made a mistake, okay? But if you just sign the residency affidavit, it all goes away. The guys calling, they just need to see stability. They see you have a penthouse. They back off. They figure, hey, the sister is loaded. The money is good." I gripped the phone. "What makes them think the money is good?" I asked. "Well," Dylan said, his voice dropping, realizing he was wading into dangerous waters, "I might have implied that you were a silent partner in the crypto thing." "You did what?" "I just put your name on the intake form," he said quickly, "just as a reference. And maybe on the cosigner line, but only for the second tranche." I felt the blood drain from my face. "You forged my signature too?" No, I digitally initialed it. It's not a big deal. It's just paperwork. But now they are saying since the primary is in default, they might look at the secondary. So if you just let Brooke move in, we can show them we are a united front, and I can refinance before they actually check the signature." He assumed I would be intimidated. He assumed that if he presented me with a mess, I would panic and do whatever he wanted to avoid a scandal. He thought I was like my parents, governed by shame. He was wrong. "You listen to me, Dylan," I said, my voice low and trembling with rage. "You are going to hang up this phone. You are going to tell Brooke that if she doesn't leave you, she is going down with you, and if you ever use my name again, I will not sue you. I will hand you over to the district attorney on a silver platter." I hung up. I sat there, staring at the wall. My emotional core shifted. It was a physical sensation, like a gear grinding into a new position. I loved Brooke. I had spent my whole life protecting her. When we were kids, I took the blame when she broke a vase. I wrote her college application essays. I paid her bail when she got arrested for shoplifting at 19. But I realize now that I wasn't helping her. I was enabling a pattern. Brooke's strategy was simple. Avoid pain, outsource consequences, resent the rescuer. She had signed the papers with Dylan. She knew what she was doing. She wanted the quick cash, the easy life, and now that the bill was due, she was trying to pass it to me. She wasn't a victim of Dylan. She was his accomplice, and she was perfectly willing to sacrifice my safety to buy herself another month of denial. I couldn't save her, not this time. If I pulled her into the lifeboat, she would just drill a hole in the bottom to see if the water was warm. I stood up, I walked to the kitchen and picked up the navy blue binder, Halcyon Residences Association. I turned to the section on governance and voting. Article 3, Meetings and Proxies. Section 2, Any unit owner may attend monthly board meetings. Owners may vote on agenda items. Owners may inspect the books of the association. My parents were playing a game of emotional chaos. They relied on tears, guilt, shouting, and confusion. They thrived in the fog. But this building ran on rules. It ran on paper. It ran on votes. If I wanted to win, I had to stop playing their game. I had to become the building. I sent an email to the board secretary. Subject: Request for meeting agenda and proxy forms. I will be attending the monthly meeting on Thursday. Please also provide the minutes from the last 3 sessions regarding security protocols. I didn't tell my parents what I was doing. I didn't warn Brooke. Thursday night came. The meeting was held in the polished conference room on the mezzanine level. There were 5 board members sitting at the head of the table. 3 men, 2 women, all looking serious and bored. There were only 4 other residents in the audience. I walked in. I was wearing my best suit, a sharp navy blazer and tailored trousers. I didn't look like the scared girl who had cried in the lobby. I looked like a shareholder. I sat in the front row, the board president. A woman named Mrs. Higgins, who wore pearls the size of grapes, looked over her glasses at me. "Welcome," she said. "You must be the new owner in 42A. "I am," I said. "Natalie Parker. We heard there was some disturbance with your guests last week," Mrs. Higgins said, sniffing slightly. "It wasn't a disturbance," I said clearly. Opening my notebook, it was a security breach, and that is actually why I'm here. I would like to discuss the building's policy on unauthorized access and the enforcement of the no trespass list. I believe our current protocols are insufficient to protect the liability of the association. Mrs. Higgins blinked. The other board members sat up straight. I wasn't apologizing. I wasn't shrinking. I was speaking their language, the language of liability, insurance, and protocol. I have reviewed the bylaws, I continued, and I have a proposal to strengthen the visitor screening process for the next hour. I didn't talk about my feelings. I didn't talk about my sister. I talked about risk. I talked about the fiduciary duty of the board to protect residents from harassment. By the end of the meeting, Mrs. Higgins was nodding. The treasurer was taking notes. I realized then that I had been fighting the wrong way. I had been trying to build a wall with my hands, pushing back against the tide of my family's dysfunction. But I didn't need to use my hands. I had the law. I had the bylaws. And now, I had the board. I walked back to my penthouse that night, the elevator rising smoothly through the shaft. I felt lighter. I was no longer reacting to their chaos. I was positioning myself. I was laying the bricks of a fortress that Richard couldn't shout down and Elaine couldn't cry through. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Richard, 2 from Brooke, 1 text from Dylan. "Come on, Nat, be a team player." I deleted them all. I wasn't on their team anymore. I was the captain of my own ship, and I was done letting pirates on board. The war wasn't over. I knew that. The lawsuit from the Ohio cabinet maker was coming. The loan sharks were circling. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the crash. I was the one steering. The storm broke on a Tuesday morning, not with thunder, but with a Google alert. I had set up the notification 3 days earlier, on Marcus's advice. I was sitting at my desk in the penthouse, watching the rain streak the floor-to-ceiling glass, when the email pinged. New civil filing. Ohio. Court of Common Pleas. Case number 24, CV 00892. Mill Creek Cabinetry versus Redcrest Interiors, Group LLC. It had happened. The cabinet manufacturer in Ohio had pulled the trigger. They were suing for breach of contract, unjust enrichment, and fraud. The amount claimed was $45,000, plus legal fees and damages. I stared at the screen. In the legal world, a filing like this was blood in the water. Once one vendor sued, the others would panic. The lumber yard, the fabric importers, the logistics companies. They would all see the filing and race to file their own claims, hoping to scrape some meat off the bone before the carcass was picked clean. My parents were effectively bankrupt. They just didn't know it yet. Or rather, they knew it. But they were still in the denial phase where they believed a single brilliant maneuver could fix everything. 10 minutes later, my phone began to vibrate. It was my mother. I let it go to voicemail. Then my father. Voicemail. Then the landline from their house. Then Brooke. The phone danced across the marble countertop like a possessed thing. The sheer volume of calls wasn't just panic. It was a strategy. They were trying to overwhelm me, to create a sense of such immediate, breathless urgency that I would stop thinking and start obeying. I waited an hour before I picked up. I wanted the initial adrenaline spike to wear off. I wanted them to be tired. When I finally answered, it was my mother. She didn't say hello. "Natalie, thank God. Where have you been? We have been calling for an hour. It is an emergency, a full-blown emergency. I know. Mom," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I saw the filing in Ohio." There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. "You saw it?" "Yes. It's public record." Well, then you know, Elaine cried, her voice pitching up into a hysteria that felt only half feigned. They are trying to ruin us. It is a misunderstanding. Of course, your father is handling it, but the bank is freezing things. They are freezing the operating accounts because of the litigation. That is standard procedure, I said. Natalie, listen to me. We need to secure Brooke. Today, the stress is killing her. She can't stay at the house with us while this is happening. The process servers are going to be coming to the door. It is traumatizing. I gripped the phone. The logic was slippery, shifting like sand. So you want her to come here? I asked. Just for the mail. Elaine pivoted instantly. She doesn't even need to sleep there tonight, but we need a safe address to route her documents. Her credit card statements, her medical bills. We need to get them out of our house so the lawyers don't subpoena them. Just let us forward her mail to Unit 42A. That is all I'm asking. A mailbox. Surely you can't say no to a mailbox. It sounded so small, so reasonable. Just a mailbox. But I heard Tessa's voice in my ear. Sharp as a razor. Mail is residency. If she gets a bank statement delivered there, she has proof of address. She can call a locksmith. She can call the police and say you are locking her out of her home. No, I said, what? Elaine sounded genuinely shocked. No mail. I said, I am not authorizing mail delivery for anyone but myself. Natalie Parker, Elaine screamed. It is a piece of paper. You are going to let your sister's medical records get lost in the system? You are going to let the process servers harass her? I am saying no. Mom, do not forward anything here. I will mark it, return to sender. You are a monster. She spat. A cold, ungrateful monster. I hung up. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of holding the wall up. It took so much energy to be the villain in their story. Brooke called that night. She didn't scream. She sounded small, broken. Nat, I'm here. Brooke, I can't stay here, she whispered. He's tearing the house apart. He's drinking. He's yelling at the walls. And Dylan. What about Dylan? He called me. He said Vince is losing patience. Vince was the loan shark, the private lender. What does that mean? I asked. He said. Brooke's voice trembled. He said he knows where Mom and Dad live. He said he knows the address in the suburbs is burnt. But he knows we have a satellite office in the city. He meant your place. Nat. Dylan told him your place was our safe house. I felt a cold prickle on the back of my neck. He thinks you are already here? Yeah. Dylan told him I moved in last week. To buy time. I closed my eyes. They had painted a target on my door without even asking me. Brooke, listen to me. If Vince thinks you are here, that is exactly why you cannot be here. You are bringing the danger to me. I know, she sobbed. I know, but I am scared. Nat, Vince said he was going to pay a visit. I can't be at Mom's house when he shows up, and I can't be on the street. I took a deep breath. I looked around my living room. It was safe. It was secure. I had security guards and cameras. It would be the easiest thing in the world to say yes, to let her in, to be the big sister who fixes it. But I knew what would happen. If I let her in, she would never leave. And Dylan would come, and my parents would come, and Vince would come. I would lose my sanctuary. I have an idea. I said, what? I will pay for a place. Not here, not Halcyon Tower. There is a corporate housing building on the west side. The Avery. It has security. It has a doorman. I will rent a studio for you for 1 month. Brooke went silent. A studio? She said. Yes, fully furnished, safe, but it's not with you. No, I said, it is not with me. It is your own space. But Mom said, she trailed off. What did Mom say? She said we need to be under the same roof, for the legal stuff. That was the tell. They didn't just want Brooke safe. They wanted the constructive trust argument. They needed the family unit to be physically located in my asset. Brooke, I said firmly, this is the offer. I will pay $3,000 for a month at the Avery. You will be safe. You will be away from Dad. You will be away from Vince. But you have to sign an agreement with me that says it is a loan. and you have to agree not to give the address to Dylan." She hesitated. A long, painful hesitation. "I don't know if Dad will let me." She said, "You are 29 years old. Brooke, you don't need his permission." "I'll ask him," she said. She hung up. 10 minutes later, Richard called. He didn't say hello. He exploded. "How dare you?" His voice boomed through the speaker. I put it on the counter and stepped back, as if the force of his anger could physically reach me. "How dare I what?" I asked calmly. "Offer to pay $3,000 to house your daughter?" "You are trying to split us up," he shouted. "You are trying to isolate her, sending her to some corporate kennel on the west side? When you have empty bedrooms? It is a luxury building. Dad, it is not family," he roared. "We need to be together. We need to consolidate. Do you not understand what is happening? The wolves are at the door. Natalie, and you are offering charity? I am offering a solution. You are being controlling," he accused. "That is what this is. You want to control where she lives. You want to control the money. You are so cold. Natalie, you have ice in your veins. You would rather throw money at a stranger's building than open your door to your own flesh and blood." I listened to him. I listened to the man who had opened a credit card in my name, the man who had tried to leverage my home to stall a bankruptcy, the man who was currently being sued for fraud. He called me controlling, and for the first time, the word didn't hurt. It felt like a diagnosis he was projecting onto me. "Dad," I said, my voice dropping to a register that was quiet and terrifyingly steady. "You have controlled me my whole life. You controlled where I went to school. You controlled what I studied. You controlled my finances by guilting me into giving you my savings. You tried to control my credit score." I stopped. I let the silence hang there. "This is not me being controlling," I said. "This is simply what boundaries look like, and I know you don't recognize them, because you have never respected anyone enough to observe them." There was a silence on the other end. A stunned, heavy silence. "The offer stands until noon tomorrow." I said, "A studio at the Avery, or she stays with you. It is your choice." I hung up. I knew they wouldn't take the offer. The Avery offered safety, but it didn't offer leverage. It didn't solve Richard's problem. I went to bed, but I didn't sleep well. I kept checking the camera feed on my phone. Saturday morning arrived with a deceptive calm. The sky was blue, the city washing itself clean after the rain. At 10 o'clock, my intercom buzzed. I looked at the monitor. My stomach dropped. It was a moving van. A white box truck, idling in the circular driveway of Halcyon Tower, and standing next to it was Elaine. She was wearing a trench coat and large sunglasses. She was holding her phone up, filming herself. Behind her stood two men in coveralls, holding a dolly. I pressed the talk button. "Mom, what are you doing?" She didn't answer me directly. She spoke to her phone, narrating for her imaginary audience. "Here we are," she said, her voice trembling with performed bravery. "We are just trying to deliver some essential items to my daughter, who is in distress. We are just trying to be a family. But my other daughter, the one who lives in the penthouse, she is refusing to help." She turned to the camera, pulling down her sunglasses. "It is heartbreaking. Honestly, to see money destroy a person's soul." She turned to the door. "Buzz us in." "Natalie," she shouted, making sure the camera caught it. "We just have a few boxes. Brooke's winter clothes. She needs them." I watched her. It was a piece of theater. She knew I wouldn't let her in. She wanted the footage. She wanted to post it, to send it to the relatives, maybe even to send it to the court to show estrangement or cruelty. I called the front desk. "Mateo," I said, "I see them." "Ms. Parker," Mateo said. His voice was tight. "They are blocking the driveway. They are not authorized." I said, "They are on the list. I know. Security is on the way." I watched on the monitor as two uniformed security guards stepped out of the glass doors. Elaine saw them and immediately pivoted. She held the phone higher. "Oh, look!" she cried. "Now she is sending the goons. She is sending security to throw her own mother off the sidewalk." "Ma'am," one of the guards said. Stepping between her and the door, You need to clear the driveway. This is private property. I am visiting my daughter, Elaine shrieked. Unit 42A. The resident in 42A has denied you access, the guard said, his voice flat and bored. He had dealt with paparazzi and angry ex-wives before. This was nothing. You are trespassing. Please instruct the truck to leave, or we will have it towed. Elaine turned to the camera again. Do you hear this? She sobbed. Denied access. To my own child. She kept filming for another minute, milking the scene for every drop of pathos. Then, abruptly, she stopped. She lowered the phone. She said something sharp to the movers. They shrugged, loaded the dolly back into the truck, and got in. Elaine got into her car, which was parked behind the truck. She looked up at the tower. She couldn't see me. I was 42 floors up, but she looked right at my window. She raised her middle finger, then she drove away. I sat on my floor, knees to my chest. I felt sick, not because I had done the wrong thing, but because I realized there was no bottom. She had staged a moving day just to get content for a smear campaign. I thought that was the worst of it. I was wrong. Tuesday came again. The monthly meeting of the Halcyon Residences Association. I walked into the conference room feeling a strange sense of déjà vu. The same board members were there. Mrs. Higgins, the treasurer, but the atmosphere was different. When I walked in, conversation stopped. Mrs. Higgins adjusted her glasses and looked at a stack of papers in front of her. She didn't smile. Ms. Parker, she said, please, sit down. I sat. We have a matter to discuss. Mrs. Higgins said, a matter regarding the reputation of the building. I stiffened. Reputation? We have received communication, Mrs. Higgins said, picking up a piece of paper, several emails, and a phone call. From a Mr. Richard Parker. My heart hammered against my ribs. Of course, he claims to be your father. Mrs. Higgins continued, he has alleged that there is a domestic dispute occurring in Unit 42A that involves financial misappropriation and elder abuse. Elder abuse, the room spun. He claims that you have seized family assets and are using the unit to harbor ill-gotten gains. Mrs. Higgins read, her nose wrinkling as if the words smelled bad. He also claims that the building is being used to hide a fugitive, your sister, from legitimate creditors. She looked at me over the rims of her glasses. Ms. Parker, Halcyon Tower is a quiet building. We value discretion. We cannot have the police, or creditors, or angry fathers making scenes in our lobby. This kind of drama lowers property values. I looked at the 5 faces staring at me. They were judging me. They didn't know the truth. They just knew that I was the source of the noise. They just knew that my family was messy, and mess was the enemy of equity. This was Richard's play. If he couldn't get in, he would burn me out. He would make me so radioactive that the building itself would pressure me to capitulate. I took a deep breath. I reached into my bag. I didn't pull out a tissue. I pulled out a folder. Mrs. Higgins, I said, my voice steady, I apologize that you have been subjected to this harassment. My father is unwell, and he is currently the defendant in a fraud lawsuit that was filed last week in Ohio. I slid the copy of the Mill Creek Cabinetry lawsuit across the table. He is desperate, I said. He is attempting to use my home, and this building, as a shield for his own insolvency. The allegations he made against me are a projection of his own legal jeopardy. I slid a second document across the table. It was the police report I had filed regarding the identity theft. The credit card opened in my name. This is a report regarding identity fraud committed by Red Crest Interiors against me, I said. And finally, I slid a third document. This is a cease and desist order that my attorney drafted this morning. It outlines the harassment campaign, the false allegations, and the attempted illegal entry. I looked Mrs. Higgins in the eye. I am not the source of the drama. Mrs. Higgins, I am the firewall. I am preventing a bankrupt entity from establishing a foothold in this building. If I were to give in to his demands, if I were to let them in, then you would have real creditors in the lobby. You would have sheriffs seizing property. By keeping them out, I am protecting the association. Mrs. Higgins picked up the lawsuit. She read the words, fraud and breach of contract. She looked at the police report. Her expression changed. The judgment was still there. But it shifted. She wasn't looking at a messy daughter anymore. She was looking at a woman under siege who was holding the gate. I see, she said slowly. She passed the papers to the treasurer. Mr. Parker has been very persistent, she noted. He threatened to go to the press about the building's security failures. He is bluffing. I said, he can't go to the press. If he draws attention to himself, his own creditors will find him faster. Mrs. Higgins nodded. She understood that logic. Rich people hiding from debt was a language she spoke. Very well, she said. The board will instruct the management company to block all communications from Mr. Parker. We will issue a formal response stating that this is a private matter and that any further harassment of our staff or board members will result in legal action from the association. Thank you, I said. I walked out of the meeting. I had won the battle, but I felt no triumph. I just felt tired. I went back to my apartment. I called Tessa. Send it. I said, Are you sure? Tessa asked. Send the package. The package was a large envelope addressed to Richard and Elaine Parker. It contained copies of everything I had just shown the board. The credit inquiries, the forged text messages, the log of the unauthorized storage unit access, and a letter. Dear Mom and Dad, enclosed is the documentation of the fraud and harassment you have committed against me over the last 6 months. This file is currently held by my attorney. If there is one more attempt to enter my building, one more email to my neighbors, or one more false allegation made to anyone, this file goes to the district attorney and to the trustee handling your impending bankruptcy. This is not a negotiation. This is a notification. Do not contact me. Natalie, it was the nuclear option. It was the end of the relationship. I knew that once they opened that envelope. There was no going back to Sunday dinners or Christmas cards. I sent it via courier. It would arrive in an hour. 40 minutes later, my phone rang. It wasn't Richard. It was Brooke. She was crying, but it wasn't the manipulative, performative crying of my mother. It was the terrified sobbing of a child who has just realized the lights are off. Nat, she choked out. Did they get the package? I asked. He's in the kitchen. He's just staring at the table. He's not moving. Mom is screaming. She's throwing things. She says you are dead to us. I closed my eyes. I felt a tear slip out. Hot and fast. I know. I said, Brooke, you have to leave. I said, you have to get out of that house. The offer for the Avery is still good. I can wire the money to the management company right now. But, Brooke sobbed, but if I leave, I'm alone. You are already alone. Brooke, you just don't want to admit it. But they're family, she wailed. They're supposed to save me. And you're supposed to save me. Why won't you just save me? The question hung in the air, raw and bleeding. I gripped the phone. I love you, Brooke, I said gently. But I learned something this week. What? She whispered. Rescue and love are not the same thing. I can love you from here, but I cannot rescue you from the consequences of your own life. If I do that, I drown too, and I am not willing to drown anymore. There was a long silence. I could hear Elaine screaming in the background, a high, jagged sound like glass breaking. I'm scared. Nat, I know. I said, being an adult is scary, but it's the only way to be free. Brooke didn't answer. She just breathed. A ragged, hitching breath. I have to go, she said. Dylan is texting me. Don't answer him, I said. I have to. She hung up. I put the phone down on the table. I walked to the window. The city was spread out below me, a grid of lights and shadows. I was safe. My walls were solid. My doors were locked. My credit was frozen. I had built a fortress. But as I looked at the empty apartment, I realized that the price of the fortress was that I was the only one inside it. I poured a glass of wine. I sat on my charcoal gray sofa. I waited for the silence to feel like victory. It didn't. It just felt like silence. But for the first time in 32 years, it was my silence, and that would have to be enough. The final assault did not come in the dead of night. It came on a Saturday morning, bright and loud, under the assumption that daylight makes all sins look like justice. I was drinking coffee, standing at the window of the 42nd floor. When I saw them, it was a convoy, my father's Lincoln Navigator, Dylan's leased Audi, and behind them, a box truck. Not a moving van from a reputable company, but an unmarked white truck. The kind you rent with cash and no questions asked. They parked in the circular drive, blocking the entrance for the residents' town cars. I watched from above as they spilled out. Richard, in a suit, Elaine, in a dress that looked appropriate for a court appearance, Brooke, huddled in a hoodie, and Dylan, wearing sunglasses and chewing gum, looking like he was directing a music video. They walked toward the glass doors with a terrifying, synchronized confidence. They weren't sneaking in this time. They were marching. I put my coffee cup down. I checked the folder on my kitchen island, the black folder Tessa had couriered over the night before. I picked it up. I didn't call security. I didn't hide. I walked to the elevator and pressed the button for the lobby. When the door slid open on the ground floor, the noise hit me instantly. Richard was already shouting. He was standing at the concierge desk, slamming a sheaf of papers against the marble. Mateo was standing behind the desk, his face pale but his posture rigid. 2 security guards were flanking him, but they looked hesitant to physically touch an older man in a 3-piece suit. "Ms. Parker," Mateo said, relief flooding his voice when he saw me. Richard spun around. The lobby was full of residents getting their morning papers or heading to brunch. They stopped. They watched. "There she is," Richard announced, his voice booming. "The squatter." He pointed a finger at me. It was a theatrical gesture, designed for the audience. "Dad," I said, walking across the terrazzo floor. My heels clicked with a steady, metronomic rhythm. "You are trespassing. Again." "I am not trespassing," Richard yelled. "I am claiming what is rightfully mine." He held up the papers in his hand. "We have consulted with counsel," he declared, looking around at the neighbors. "We have evidence that the purchase of Unit 42A was funded with misappropriated family assets. The LLC she used? It is a shell. It is invalid. The funds she used to buy this place were diverted from the family business over a period of 5 years." A murmur went through the lobby. It was a lie, a bold, confident lie. But in a building like Halcyon Tower, financial impropriety was the ultimate sin. He was trying to taint the deed. He was trying to make me look like an embezzler so the building would turn on me. He threw the papers on the desk. "We are filing a motion for constructive trust on Monday morning," he sneered. "But until then, as the source of the funds, I am authorizing my daughter Brooke to take residence. We have the right of entry." Elaine stepped forward, nodding vigorously. "It is family money," she chirped to a woman waiting for her poodle. "She stole it from her father's company. Can you imagine?" Dylan leaned against the concierge desk, smirking. He looked at me with a pitying expression. "Game over. Nat, just give up the keys. We brought the movers. It is happening." I stopped 10 feet away from them. I didn't look at the papers. I didn't look at the neighbors. I looked at Mateo. "Mateo," I said calmly, "is Mr. Dylan Kessler a resident of this building?" "No." "Miss Parker," Mateo said, "is he a guest of any resident?" "No." "Miss Parker? Then why is he standing in the lobby?" Dylan's smirk faltered. "Hey, whoa. I am with the family." I turned to Dylan. "You are not family." I said, "You are a trespasser, and you are a security risk." Richard stepped in front of Dylan. "He is with us." "You can't kick him out. He is Brooke's support system." I looked at the security guard. "Please remove Mr. Kessler." The guard stepped forward. Dylan bristled, puffing out his chest. "Don't touch me. Man, we have rights. We have a legal claim to this unit." Mateo cleared his throat. He tapped his keyboard. The large monitor behind the desk, usually used to display weather and building announcements, flickered. "Actually," Mateo said, his voice cutting through the tension, "we have an active ban on Mr. Kessler due to a prior incident. On the screen, Grainy black and white footage appeared. It was time-stamped 3 weeks ago. It showed Dylan standing by the resident elevators in the basement garage. He was trying to pry the panel open with what looked like a screwdriver. He was looking around nervously, testing the security door, trying to bypass the fob system. The lobby went silent. Dylan's face turned the color of ash. That isn't me," he stammered. "It is clearly you." I said, "That is attempted breaking and entering." I turned to the guard. "Get him out. Now." The guard didn't hesitate this time. He grabbed Dylan by the arm. Dylan tried to jerk away, looking at Richard for help. "Richard, do something!" Dylan yelped. Richard didn't move. He stared at the screen. Seeing the proof that his son-in-law was a common thief, he looked at Dylan with a flash of disgust, then looked away. The guard dragged Dylan toward the revolving doors. Dylan shouted, cursing, his sneakers squeaking on the floor, until he was shoved out onto the sidewalk. I turned back to my parents. "One down," I said. Elaine let out a strangled cry. She rushed to the center of the lobby, throwing her arms out. "You are heartless!" she screamed. Her voice cracked, echoing off the high ceilings. "Look at you, standing there in your expensive suit, kicking people out into the street." She turned to the residents, tears streaming down her face. "I gave up everything for her," she wailed. "I sacrificed my career. I sacrificed my savings. We paid for her braces. We paid for her school. We took care of her when she was sick. And this is how she repays us? By stealing our money and locking us out?" She pointed at me, her finger trembling. "You are a cold, selfish girl. Natalie, you think you are better than us? You are nothing without us. We made you. It was a performance designed to break me." She was listing the standard ledger of parenthood, the basic obligations of raising a child, and presenting them as a debt I could never repay. She wanted me to snap. She wanted me to scream. "I didn't ask to be born, or I paid you back." She wanted a tantrum because a tantrum would prove I was still a child. I stood perfectly still. I waited for her to finish. I waited until the only sound in the lobby was her jagged breathing. "Are you done?" I asked. Elaine blinked, stunned by my lack of reaction. "What?" "I asked if you were done listing the things you did as a mother." I said, "Because none of that changes the math." I opened the black folder. "Richard," I said, "you mentioned a constructive trust. You mentioned that the LLC was funded with money from Redcrest Interiors." "That is right," Richard barked. Sensing a pivot back to ground, he understood. "And we will prove it. We will audit every dime." "You don't need to audit," I said. "I have the books right here." I pulled out a document. It wasn't a deed. It was a thick stack of papers stapled together with a blue cover sheet. "I know about the lawsuit with Mill Creek Cabinetry," I said. "I know about the $45,000 you owe them. I know about the judgment coming from the fabric supplier. I know that Redcrest Interiors is insolvent." Richard's face went purple. "That is private business information. You have no right. And I know about your line of credit." I interrupted. "The primary business line with First City Bank, the one secured by your personal assets. The one that is currently 90 days past due." Richard froze. The air seemed to leave his lungs. "How do you know about the First City note?" "Because First City Bank doesn't like bad debt." I said, "They bundle it. They sell it to distressed asset firms. Or in rare cases, they sell it to private parties who make a full cash offer to take the headache off their hands." I took a step forward. I held up the document. I bought the note. Dad, the silence that descended on the lobby was absolute. It was heavier than the silence of the library. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging at the top of its arc. Richard stared at the papers. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "I bought the debt," I repeated, keeping my voice low and level. "I used the rest of my savings. I worked with Tessa's firm to acquire the outstanding note on Redcrest Interiors 2 days ago. I am the holder in due course." I looked him in the eye. "You don't owe the bank anymore. Richard, you owe me $82,000, secured by your house, and the inventory, and the Lincoln parked outside." Elaine stopped crying. She looked from Richard to me. her eyes wide with a dawning horror. "Natalie?" she whispered. "What does that mean?" "It means," I said, turning to her, "that I am not just your daughter anymore. I am your senior creditor. And unlike the bank, I know exactly where the money went. I know it went to country club dues you couldn't afford. I know it went to Dylan's crypto scams." I turned back to Richard. "So here is the situation. You are standing in my lobby, accusing me of fraud, threatening to sue me for a penthouse I bought with my own taxed income. Meanwhile, I hold the paper that can liquidate your business by 5 o'clock today." Richard was shaking. His hands were trembling so badly he had to grip the edge of the concierge desk. The arrogance was gone. The smug confidence of the patriarch was gone. In its place was the terrified realization that the power dynamic hadn't just shifted, it had inverted. He had spent his whole life thinking money was the only way to keep score, and he had just lost the game. You wouldn't," he stammered. "We are family." I looked at the document. "You tried to move into my house against my will." I said, "You opened a credit card in my name. You slandered me to my neighbors. You tried to sue me. You didn't treat me like family. Dad, you treated me like a resource. So I am treating you like a liability." I pulled another document from the folder. A single page. "This is a settlement agreement." I said, "It is very simple. It states that you acknowledge I am the sole owner of this unit. It states that you will cease all harassment. It states that you will withdraw the false claims of family money, and it states that you will never, ever come to this building again." I placed it on the desk next to a pen. "If you sign this, and if you leave right now, I will agree to a forbearance on the debt. I will give you 12 months to restructure and pay me back the principal. Interest-free. I won't seize the house. I won't liquidate the company. And if we don't," Elaine whispered, "then I call the note." I said, "Immediately. I file for a confession of judgment. I seize the business accounts. And I hand the file on the identity theft to the police." I waited. Richard looked at the agreement. He looked at me. He looked for the scared little girl he used to bully into writing checks. She wasn't there. He picked up the pen. "Richard," Elaine hissed, "you can't sign that. It is humiliating. Sign it." "Elaine," Richard said. His voice was a rasp. "Just sign it." He signed his name with a shaky hand. He didn't read the fine print. He knew he had no choice. Elaine looked at me with pure hatred. She grabbed the pen and slashed her signature across the line. "There," she spat. "Are you happy? You have won. You have destroyed your family." I didn't answer. I picked up the agreement. I checked the signatures. I looked at Brooke. She was standing by the door, hugging her elbows. She hadn't said a word. She had watched the entire thing, Dylan getting thrown out, the reveal of the debt, the surrender of our parents. "Brooke," I said. She looked up. Her face was streaked with tears, but her eyes were clear. "You have a choice," I said. "You can get in the car with them. You can go back to that house and wait for the next crisis, or you can stay here." Her eyes widened. "Stay here? In the penthouse?" "No," I said firmly. "Not in the penthouse. I told you, I am not rescuing you. But the offer for the studio at the Avery stands. I will pay the first month. I will help you get a job, but you do it alone. No Dylan, no mom and dad. Just you." Elaine grabbed Brooke's arm. "Brooke, let's go. We are leaving. Your sister is sick." Brooke looked at Elaine's hand on her arm. She looked at Richard, who was staring at the floor, defeated. Then she reached into her pocket. She pulled out her phone. She walked over to me. Her hands were shaking, but she held the phone out. "Here," she whispered. "What is this?" I asked. "It's the texts," she said, "between me and Dylan. And the emails from Dad where he told Dylan to use your address. It proves everything. It proves they planned it." "Brooke!" Elaine shrieked. "What are you doing? Don't you dare betray us." Brooke didn't look at her. She looked at me. "I don't want to go back," she said. "I'm tired. Nat, I'm so tired." "Then step away from them," I said. Brooke took a deep breath. She stepped back. She put 3 feet of space between herself and Elaine. "I'm staying," Brooke said. Elaine gasped. She looked at Brooke like she was a stranger. You ungrateful? After everything? Let's go. Elaine, Richard said. He sounded old. He sounded broken. He walked toward the revolving doors without looking back. Elaine hesitated. She looked at me, then at Brooke, her face cycling through rage, self-pity, and finally, shock. She realized she had lost her audience. She turned and followed Richard. I watched them go. I watched them get into the Navigator. I watched them drive away. The lobby was quiet again. Mateo exhaled a long breath. I will file this agreement in the incident log. Ms. Parker, thank you. Mateo. I looked at Brooke. She was shivering, standing in the middle of the lobby with her hands in her pockets. She looked like a refugee from a war she barely understood. Come on, I said. Can I come up? She asked. Just for a minute? No, I said. She flinched. We are going to the coffee shop next door. I said, we are going to get you a bagel, and then we are going to call the leasing office at the Avery, but I have nowhere to sleep tonight. She said, you have a hotel. I said, I booked it an hour ago, for 2 nights, until the apartment is ready. I walked toward the door. She didn't move for a second. Nat? She called out. I stopped. Did you really buy the debt? She asked. Or was that a bluff? I tapped the folder. I really bought it. Why? She asked. Why didn't you just let them sink? Because, I said, looking out at the city streets where the morning sun was finally burning off the fog. If I let them sink, they would have dragged us both down. I didn't buy the debt to punish them. Brooke, I pushed the door open. I bought it so I could finally fire them. We walked out into the sunlight. It was cold, but the air was clean. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt the heavy, solid weight of my own life in my hands. It was mine now. Every brick, every dollar, every silence. And as I walked down the street, my sister a few paces behind me, trying to keep up, I realized that was the only luxury that really mattered. Thank you for listening to this story. It was a long journey from the showroom floor to the final signature, and I hope you felt every moment of the tension. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed Natalie's battle for boundaries, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel for more tales of justice, family drama, and the sweet taste of winning. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Natalie was too harsh on her parents? Or did she do exactly what needed to be done? I can't wait to read your opinions.